food.
Well, hello everyone. Today, in these COVID times, looking like we are slowly getting back to normal life, and it's great to have you both to discuss on this really important issue of the oceans. Um, Lucy, who I know very well, Lucy Woodward, which is our ocean scientist from the Necton Institute and Oxford University, and also Arizona Muse, who is joining us today. For the first time to speak about this very important topic of the oceans, and on a really to start the discussion on a very general way. The first question would be, why are the oceans so important for everyone? And I think Lucy, I'll give this one to you first, and then Arizona.
Great, thank you so much. Well, I think that what we don't remember is that actually we all benefit from the oceans every day, even if we've never seen the ocean, because it provides, regulates, maintains, and supports so many different processes and products. So I'm going to start with some examples, kind of some of the obvious ones, and then move on to some that we maybe never even thought about. So first, of course, we have harvesting of fish and other food production from the ocean. And this is really important and critical that it's done sustainably, as many of the population really rely on this form of protein. But now to a few other things you might not have thought about. So there's tiny algae on the surface of the water in the ocean, and they produce about half of the oxygen in the air. Carbon is stored in the ocean, and this is down to the uptake of carbon using chemical and physical processes. And again, these tiny little algae and seagrass and mangroves. So there's a really large process going on there. The ocean itself provides nutrients through its circulatory process connecting the planet. And a final one for us to think about is that, of course, the ocean provides recreation for some of us, and maybe things like fascination for others when we're watching documentaries about bits of the planet we can never get to. So there's a few examples of how and why the oceans are important to everyone.
Thank you, Lucy. And Arizona, what would you like to add to that?
I would say they're beautiful. They provide so much fun for us. We can discover things in them that we didn't know about before. I mean, it's just, they are endless when it comes to their importance and usefulness. And many cultures, as we know, forever have always worshipped oceans and found them to be sacred places and appreciated their energy as well. That the moon for the tide, there's so much that is going on where we can witness the connection between the Earth and the other planets, and that's really cool that the ocean is there showing us that we don't. I personally live in London. I live on the 8th floor in a flat, and I don't have great access to nature, and I don't have great access to the feelings as the moon passes over. But when I'm at the ocean, I'm able to really witness nature in a totally different way. It brings it so close to home, and I feel like the ocean is a big teacher for us, and we can learn so much about how to connect more with nature, and that's so important right now in this time of absolute climate emergency that we're in.
Hold on, I'm muted. Now, obviously, the oceans, which you both said are incredibly important for us, have some really frightening threats right now. And I would like you to tell me how you see that. What are the main threats that are now, endangering our oceans? Lucy.
Sure. So I think the first thing to remember is that all of ocean threats are directly related to human activity. Climate change. Climate change has consequences on the ocean, and these are many. And they include things like increased temperature, that's causing coral bleaching, and of course likely their death if that warming is prolonged. And right now, as we speak, that is going on in a number of different reef systems in Maldives and also on the Great Barrier Reef. There's also the impact of acidification, and this comes from the oxygen, from the carbon dioxide uptake from the air into the ocean. And this leads to, for example, like thinner shells on sea snails, making it harder for them to survive and thrive. And of course, we also have sea level rise, which we're going to touch on probably later because of our links with extreme E, and the reduction of oxygen levels. And both of these mainly result from temperature increases. And of course, all of them together change the conditions that are in the environment. And of course, life has evolved to live in these really precise conditions. Therefore, it makes it more stressful, and they have to then start to evolve and to be able to take account of those changing conditions. And this can only happen if we've got a large biodiversity, and there's a lot of chance of this evolution to these new conditions. So there's a lot wrapped up in this type of challenge. Of course, there's a lot of global concern about fisheries practices that don't comply with sustainable management. And of course, those that are unregulated, unsustainable, and illegal. Not all fishing gear is equal. There are some that are much more destructive than others. And I can draw your attention specifically to things like bottom trawling, which damages fragile seabed habitats. And these habitats themselves are the places that a lot of our biodiversity, a lot of the animals that live in the ocean live. So, and of course there are regional stresses. And there are a number of things like coastal development and pollution. And some of that pollution you can't see, like chemicals. But of course, there is a lot of interest now in the pollution that we can see, things like plastics and other fuel extraction practices.
Personally, I've stopped eating fish because I just don't feel that there is any such thing as sustainable fishing at the moment. I think we just need to give our oceans and lakes and rivers a break and leave the species that still are there and the populations that still are there alone for a little while, not forever, but just imagine if they got a 10-year break where humans just let go and just went, okay. And I would still say it's really important to allow traditional coastal fishing communities to continue fishing. They're the ones who deserve to keep fishing, but not the enormous trawlers or the dynamite fishing, the ones who go into deep seas and collect the biggest, largest, oldest fish. I mean, it's so detrimental. And recently, a whale will absorb more carbon dioxide than a tree over its lifetime. And when I heard that, I was like, oh, okay, so us planting trillions of trees, but not really paying much attention yet to the dwindling number of creatures within our waters is craziness. I guess to me, it looks again like these typical human mistakes that we've made so often, where we look in the wrong place for information and we look in the wrong place for solutions. And I really hope that 2020 is the year that we all decide, okay, enough of this. We're going to be logical and we are going to move rapidly and we are going to change the world because we love the world, because we want to continue living here. We want our future generations of humans to be healthy and well and happy and value mental health instead of continual production and the increase of growth. And I think that now is a very, very exciting time to rethink all of these things and be radical.
I mean, definitely it's a very interesting time, and I think COVID can for sure probably point the world in the right direction, or in a better direction than the one it was going until now. And seeing all these big stimulus packages that are going to come into play
Yeah.
now. The governments are gonna invest huge amounts of money into the recovery. If they invest that on the right direction, that can make a huge change. And
Mm.
one of the ideas that you mentioned is very interesting, definitely, Arizona. And what do you think is the role of the fashion industry or the impact of the fashion industry? We all, it's an industry that I love, and it's an industry that creates millions of jobs around the world, but of course has an impact. What do you think is the possibility to improve that, and what is the effect of fashion industry in the oceans?
Mm. I mean, the effect of fashion on the oceans is enormous because even if a factory, a manufacturer isn't located on the coast of an ocean, they will normally be connected to the ocean by a river. And a lot of pollution is just dumped into rivers still. Even now, it still is. And now there are better laws in some places, like for instance, you must filter out your water before you dump it in the river next door. But then my question is, where are those filters going? Like that doesn't poof mean that the pollution just vanishes and doesn't exist anymore. It still exists. It's just not going into the river, but it's going into a landfill somewhere, which is how, and then water again is our big connector. Water connects the entire earth and it is continuously traveling around freshwater, saltwater, evaporating back into freshwater, and it's a cycle that we have to be much more respectful of. Right now we've kind of lost touch with how incredible and sophisticated water is on the earth, on the surface, and then deeper down as well. So pollution from fashion is enormous. And also, let's not forget that agriculture is part of fashion because cotton is grown. Skins are raised on soil and also fed corn and soy. And corn and soy are grown heavily intensive agricultural businesses using high amounts of chemical fertilizer, pesticides, and herbicides. All of those chemicals are part of water pollution, and we don't immediately associate that with fashion, but it is, because fiber production is an enormous part of agriculture. And so it's something that we need to connect in a big way, that fashion is in fact responsible for ocean pollution and needs to be a part of the purification of ocean and of the repopulation of species in the ocean, and get involved with ocean organizations who are helping to make reparations, but also helping to reduce the amount of pollution. And we could even talk about the human side of this, the slavery on these enormous boats that stay offshore. They never dock, and then they have boats that shuttle back and forth people from usually impoverished nations, and they take their passports and then they're stuck on these boats. Often there are deaths that are never accounted for, and it's an enormous issue. Is what I when I started to learn about ocean environmentalism and also ocean social health, I realized, wow, this is an enormous problem, and this is just the tip of the iceberg. And it just, the more I learn, it makes me realize the more there is to know.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Lucy, what do you think I mean, because of course we cannot, and I was listening to Giorgio Armani, who was having some interesting remarks about how far, or maybe that fashion industry had gone too far, and we were changing clothes too often, and having too many collections every year and too much of everything, and maybe it was a time to rethink that. Of course, we humans have to be clothed with something, but what do you think is kind of the long-term view here to kind of make compatible a normal human life with the health of the oceans?
That's a really good point, and I think I just want to dwell on the points that Arizona gave us, because actually she was referring to that fact that we're all connected. So we can talk about the fashion industry, but when we talk about the fashion industry, we have to think about kind of societies and that social history. We have to think about what we want to do today, and we have to think about our lives in the future. And there's so many different industries that are connected. So I think on that point, we need to think radical, and we need to think different, right? We know that the old mold hasn't helped us in the past. So what can we do? Well, of course, the fashion industry, as we've already said, is massive. It's hugely important, commercially for livelihoods, but let's also remember also as trendsetters. So this means that actually there is a perfect platform to be able to address some of the real changes that are needed and to really be leaders. To make this a healthier ocean and therefore a healthier planet for future generations. So as I mentioned climate change previously, I think I'm going to start there. We need to think about where emissions arise. So as Arizona's already said, this is not just the production and things like that, but it's also the agriculture aspects of getting those products before they move into the fashion industry. And of course, there is already a fashion industry charter through the UN, which has an amazing vision for zero emissions by 2050. Of course, that's a really ambitious target, but we do need to ask if 2050, being 30 years away, is a really good time to think about being net zero when we want to try and keep those temperature rises to just a few degrees. Otherwise, it is going to impact all of us across the planet in the ways that it's already impacting a number of different nations. So we can do some things like swapping and switching different materials, but I do want to dwell on this idea of being a powerful influencer, because I think there is immediate changes to think about, really valuing what we have around us. And each of us can do an audit about that. Do we know where these things that we've consumed come from? How much do we actually value it? Is it our favorite bit of clothing? Because we all have those. Is it something that we're going to keep for years and years? So both by mirroring good practice that they can see within brands and also by valuing the products that are available, consumers really have a lot of scope here to change their own behaviours. So things like being able to have lines align with reuse, repairing and recycling, moving away from this idea of disposable clothing. And let's think about it. People have made everything that we make, that we wear rather, whether that's people in our families that have made something for us to wear, or whether they're people that we never know their names, but they're always people. And actually that's a massive skill. So we should be valuing these amazing pieces of clothing that we wear because they're crafts. So maybe if we could turn clothing into crafts, then we might be able to value it more for the real cost of it. So turning away from the fast fashion, understanding the links between the healthy ocean and all of the benefits for society. And I really think that the fashion industry has the opportunity to lead in this narrative, and that is the key to the future.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting, that the influence and the awareness that can be raised by fashion. Arizona, what would you say to that?
I would say it's so well said, Lucy. It is so important that right now there's a lot of talk in fashion and outside fashion about should we continue on with the fashion show? Is the fashion show necessary, or should we stop doing fashion shows and Fashion Week because it's extremely wasteful and so many people fly around the world to watch these shows and all the set is just completely wasted afterwards. It's they spend millions building sets every season, and then all those materials are wasted. And I'm of the camp who thinks, no, we shouldn't stop all of that. We should reduce the waste immensely. And I think we should rely a lot more heavily on digital viewing rather than in-person viewing. I also see that would have a human benefit as well. It's absolutely exhausting for the people who have to go around the world and see every single show in every single, because Fashion Week is not Fashion Week, it's Fashion Month. It starts in New York for a week, then it's London, then it's Milan, and then it's Paris. So there's a whole month of shows every single day. So the editors and some celebrities, and there's a whole incredibly large and diverse group of people who has to go and see those shows. they are completely burnt out and exhausted by the end of it. It's not a good system. It's not suiting anyone. So I think we need to change it. And there is a big conversation going on about that, thank goodness. A new initiative launched called Rewiring Fashion, started by Dries van Noten, who's a very well-respected designer. And more than 400 brands have already signed up saying, yes, we want to redo the fashion calendar. We want it to suit us so that we are not trying to sell product 6 months after we showed it and spent a huge amount of money on that show. It just doesn't make sense. It suits the retailers more than it suits the brands and the designers themselves. So it's an exciting time where the changes are being talked about finally. And that wasn't even true a year and a half ago. That was not true. And now all the people in fashion who have always been the sustainability people, who are now my friends and I love them, and they have been doing this for 10, 15 years, and it felt like they were, banging their heads against brick walls saying, excuse me, we know there's a problem and we have some solutions, we'd like to talk to you about it. And the industry was just bored and just being deaf. They were being deaf to this need to change until about 18 months ago. And that is so exciting for everyone working on sustainability to say, finally, the industry is coming to us now, the organizations who've been working for 10 years. Unprecedented interest and questions, and the industry saying we need to change. We don't quite know how yet. We do see a lot of greenwashing as well, and a lot of decisions being made that might not be quite the right answers or the right solutions, but at least it is a hot topic, and that is quite cool. And let's hope that the influence of the industry, the fashion industry, will have an impact around the globe in other industries too.
That takes me very well, and we this is my last kind of point today. Takes me very well to the changes that are, and I would like your view on that. The changes that are happening, what we can do, and what's happening also in the direction of digitalization. And a reflection is that I think fashion is going to change a lot. Our fashion partner is actually an online platform, fashion platform, LUISAVIAROMA, and we have been discussing with them, and they say that they've seen the effect of course, the increase on shopping online, the decrease of the high street, and of course, people hasn't been able to go shopping. It's interesting to see if that is going to be a trend that is going to continue in the future, even when we get, how would I call it, locked out of our homes. Will we go back to the high street? Will the traditional shops with their, real estate there and their employees and so on will continue, or we will go the shift to digital, which was already very important in fashion, will be stronger? I mean, it's interesting to see what the outcome will be. And then last, we have a ship. We want to do some, definitely, some projects, even in our small dimension with our ship. We're going to go around the oceans, and Lucy's thinking of something very interesting, like open appeal for ideas that we could do to help the ocean. So I would give you both the last chance to give some comments on any of these. I just kind of ramble around the different topics, but I think it was incredibly interesting discussion today. But please go both ahead and conclude.
Tips and tricks. There's so many. You go ahead, Lucy. Go ahead.
Thank you. So I think what I would like to start with is really thinking about how quickly we can change. And I just want to bring in two examples. We've had enforced change over the last few months, many of us, because of the coronavirus. And of course, this has been devastating across the planet. But it does mean that we have changed our behaviours, and we've done that. So everyone moving in the same direction has changed their behaviours in actually just a few weeks. And I think that is really important for us to remember. Yeah. And, and I kind of think about it, especially when I think about things like plastic water bottles. I mean, we mentioned plastics a little bit. I've done a lot of research on looking at human impacts in the ocean. And, plastic water bottles is always this sort of big thing that people think about. Well, of course, when I was a child, nobody would think in the UK about buying water in a bottle because it came out of the tap and it was fresh. And of course, you know, that was a huge privilege to have that in the UK. And of course, that's not like it in many other countries. But because of changes in behaviours and acceptance, now it's kind of the norm to have that one-use water bottle. Can we change everyone's behaviours back to go, actually, the tap's okay? And maybe sometimes we maybe, of course, need that option of buying that bottle of water. But is that every day? And we can change these behaviours. Again, that's something that I've seen just in my lifetime. So I think that's sort of my first reflection. My second one is, of course, we want to understand more about the planet and those connections that we've all spoken about today. That is my job, finding out more about the planet and being able to communicate that and use that in a really amazing way. And that is the important aspect of the work we're hoping to do on the ship with Extreme E, getting lots of scientists involved in their projects, be able to share that across the planet. So not just those of us from the UK, but really thinking about some of those nations that we're going to with the races, promoting their scientists, making sure that they have an opportunity of being on the stage, talking about those local issues and the local solutions that are absolutely key to finding the global suite of solutions to these really important challenges. But finally, I think it's really important for us to remember that as a scientist, of course, I always want more data. But turning data into information and then turning that into knowledge is really key. And then going from knowledge into impact. What do we do with that stuff? Because I can have a spreadsheet full of numbers. I can have a paper written with a lot of words in it. But unless there's action that's taken from that information and knowledge, it is not going to change. So these dialogues that we're having across our different disciplines, our interests, our networks, for me, are absolutely key. And I think that's actually what's really exciting about some of these partnerships, some of these novel creations of networks. Being able to talk to someone who understands the fashion industry as me as a scientist is fantastic. Being able to talk to you, Alejandro, as a leader in business, an innovator, and someone who's willing to take these challenges with Extreme E is vital for us to be able to have these dialogues, and we can set up these new radical solutions that are going to be our opportunities of the future.
Thank you, Lucy. And Arizona.
Oh, you're amazing, Lucy. Wow. Tips and tricks from me, definitely pay attention to the materials that you're buying. Whenever you make a purchase, you are making a vote. You are sending a message that is rippling across the world through somebody's supply chain. And it's really important that you make those decisions carefully. Always read the labels of what materials are in your clothes before you buy them, what ingredients are in your food, and try to reduce packaging. Buy from places who are deliberately not wrapping food. Buy from brands who are deliberately not wrapping their clothes in plastic. And read the sustainability pages on websites. Every website will have not everyone, but almost all of them now have a sustainability page. And here are a few tricks on how to read them, because one thing, you read them and a lot of them that I read, they're very fluffy writing. It's like you read the first paragraph and you still haven't really learned anything about what they're doing. That means they aren't doing anything. It really does, because the ones who are doing a lot and making changes, they're so eager to tell you about them that they cram it all into the first paragraph. And that's when you can tell, wow, I'm learning so much. Okay, this brand must be doing something really good. So definitely don't be a fool when it comes to greenwashing. Educate yourself so that you can call people out, call brands out when they're not telling the full truth. They may not be completely lying, but they might just not be telling you enough information about what they really do. It's very common that we see brands will make a capsule collection, a small collection of healthy clothing, like organic cotton, for instance. But then you look at the rest of their collection and it's still completely the same as it always has been, and they aren't making changes across their main collection. And that's something I don't support anymore, because that was the thing of like the 1990s when everyone went, oh, let's make an organic t-shirt. Yay, raise awareness about the oceans. And the time for that is over. We cannot do that anymore. It's much more effective, for instance, to make a commitment that across your entire collection, you're going to start using 30% organic cotton. That commitment is enormous because it's ongoing. So that will be supporting organic farmers in a much bigger way than just doing a mini capsule collection one time. That's really difficult business for a supply chain to receive. Manufacturers then have to make one order for organic cotton cloth, and it's not stable, it's not sustainable. So sustainability isn't just about the actual earth and the geography of everything. It's actually about the business practice as well. So those are a few of my tips and tricks. Reducing plastic, I mean, Lucy's the master of that. Definitely helps a lot in your home, and there's so many ways in which you can do that. Just the way I started was not having liquid soap anymore, because when you have liquid soap, it has to come in a plastic bottle. But if you do a bar of soap, it doesn't come in a plastic bottle. It's just so simple. And there's so many trade-outs like that can actually make an enormous difference, especially when you count it over your whole lifetime. So I'm 31. I've stopped using plastic soap that comes in plastic bottles. I'm going to do this till I die. Imagine how many plastic bottles that is that I'm saving. And when you realize that, you're like, whoa, just little me, can have an enormous impact.
Well,
Arizona, that's so
Arizona. Yeah,
I loved your Arizona. I loved your comments. I felt they were so empowering, and I think that's sometimes a challenge. We feel like these are wicked problems, that they're so big and too big and away from us and we can't do anything. And thank you for those insights and tips. I think that was really powerful.
Yes, and I was going to say that it's very interesting about the soap, because I always use a bar soap all my life, and my kids make fun of me because they say, Dad, the bar soap is to wash your hands. And I'm like, no, I always also wash my body with the bar soap, and they make fun of me. But I guess they're in the wrong generation. They're like between 9 and 15. I'm 49. You're 31. Definitely some work to do on that teenager phase now to bring them to where you are.
Yeah, there is. It's so much fun though, and that's what I would encourage everyone, is that learning all this stuff, it's like a big game. It's like you play a game, and every time you reduce plastic or every time you buy something that's better quality, you're winning at the game. It's so much fun learning all of this stuff, and it doesn't make your life less comfortable. That's also what I'd really like to leave the audience with, is that we may have some fears about, like, oh, if I become sustainable, am I going to have to deny myself things all the time, and I'm going to live a less comfortable life because I'm being environmentally friendly? That's not true. My life is so much more comfortable now, and I appreciate everything in it so much more. And my life is enriched since I went on this sustainability journey. So I would really invite everyone, come in, join the sustainability bandwagon. It's way more fun and more comfortable.
We'll leave it at that. I think that's a great sentence to close the session this morning. But thank you so much, both Arizona. Thank you, Lucy. As we will promote this content, our partner LUISAVIAROMA, all our other partners, Extreme, and hope to see you very soon. Hopefully also on the ship, and we take a real journey also on the ocean.
Amazing.
Thank you.
That'd be amazing. Thank you for hosting us so much. Really, really nice to meet both of you.